Well, welcome to 2024. I can't believe we've got another year under our belt. We're ready for 2024. January the 8th, Lunch and Learn Code updates by the HVACR licensing program and by the HVACR Association. Tony Woodard is the chief inspector for the state. Tony, I started off with this slide. This says ducks, ducks, ducks. Why? Why? It said, does it seem like we have to talk about ducks so much?
Because that is where that's the one thing we continue to find the violations and the newer shall I say newer contractor,
Oh,
not going to
yeah.
give ages, or just seem to without formal education, there's quite a bit that they're lacking, and we're trying to get everybody, especially on the safety aspects of knowing why they need to do things in a different manner. I'm
Right.
having a better. I'm going to have a better year this year as far as correctness. We'll
Good.
see how long it
You know,
lasts.
the big thing that you inspect and all the inspectors across the state are primarily concerned about is new installations anyway, or even retrofit installations. So it just makes sense since the ductwork is such a huge portion of it. I mean, the equipment ought to be right. It ought to be. It's coming from the factory. Now, how we connect to it's one thing, but that duct, that's a heck of a lot of stuff that they're having to install. And, if they do it right, it makes the system so much more efficient.
That's correct. That's right.
Well, you sent me some pictures, and I've got a couple of slides here, and man, that's something you're going to have to help me on. Explain these for me, would you please?
Okay. This was a gentleman that actually is a heating and air contractor up in Northwest Arkansas. He owns, this is his home,
Okay.
and he did the due diligence to do all this work. He actually, so you take your two befores, and he lined one side of OSB, laid it down, and then tacked the other side with the bubble wrap on the other side to line it on both sides. Built these in 3 panels and stood them up and did a tremendous a lot of work.
Okay.
And it
Okay. Let me interrupt you just a second, Tony. From somebody who's not read the code or doesn't know, boy, that looks good.
it looks real good. It looks, you walk in there and you go, man, that looks like an outstanding line. And it is. Don't get me wrong. It's a well constructed return sealed chase way for residential market. However, we have to try to teach as well as the proper procedures, but let's give them the breathing zone that we build these things for. And there's reasoning and madness why our returns need to be of metal or proper design, not just for the efficiency part, but for the indoor air quality, huge indoor air quality issue. So,
Well, 30 years ago, when I had a little company and we were installing stuff, energy efficiency. And so when I look at this, I think, well, that sucker's not going to leak. That looks good. So
yep.
what is the problem with this?
The problem with that, and I did the due diligence. I got off the phone with the Thermo Reflect group this morning, and I talked with Tech. I talked with them. So if anybody can get these, you can blow this up. You can blow these pictures up. That little blue line you seeing across there. So the NFPA 90A basically talks about what air's moving across and what we're going to breathe. There's certain test ASTM versus all this, what we always hear them telling us, flame spread smoke development. When they're gluing liner on, they've done it for years, and they'll see that 2550. They might never knew what it was. But that is a breathing component that won't break down. And if there ever is a fire situation, smoke or it will not off gas. And that's what will incapacitate somebody quicker than the fire. So these products get tested to these tests. Now, this product has been tested to the ASTM 84E and the indoor part of the ASTM 4C, but for exterior use only. And I made it clear with them because I wanted to give this guy's, due diligence, make sure he didn't have to go back and us protect this. And one of the things we tell folks out there, why are you making me do this? Well, I understand this is my home. I'm going to live here. But if you ever put that home up for sale, or there's one thing that every last one of us can't avoid, and that's death. So that home will be brought up for somebody. We have to ensure it's safe for the next individual or family or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not approved for interior. It's approved for exterior, but it can't be used as liner because it will not meet that. It has characteristics that it can mold and mildew and spoil, and it can start off gassing if it gets to a temperature. And so we have to correct that. But it looks great. I mean, if you look at it and you're like, wow. And I know he had a lot of work involved with it.
Well, you made a very good point in that basically he might think that he could do it for his own home. He wouldn't realize that the title of that is I can kill myself, but he definitely cannot create a situation where it endangers other people who wouldn't have a clue that this was a problem or even existed in the home when they got ready to buy it.
That's right. Now, if he would have lined this with metal, if this would have been a metal duct, come down, and he put his reflectix and his spacers and all that, and then perfect, it would have been okay. A duct board, actually, with this slab, and I want to mention, since we're looking at this, I don't know if we get further. I think we will. We'll get into the sheetrock aspect, but the far slide to the right, I really want folks to pay attention to that. And it's that right pictorial, down here in the bottom, the pictorial from the energy amendments.
Oh, down here. Yes, sir. We're about to go to that one.
Yes, that shows you that you're going from your zone you're in. When guys talk about I can sheetrock the bottom, well, you're going above your head, you're going to another area. That is metal. That's non-combustible. Yeah. Even the duct board wouldn't go up and go through that area. That's metal, period. That's going to be a metal duct to protect them. It's a non-combustible radiator, contain the smoke, the draft, the fire, and so forth. And that's in our code, and it's been in our code. So it's just one of the things we use for single-family dwelling, residential style. But the gentleman did he was doing that picture there. That's a good one. JC was able to get up and shine that. Now the wood up in there he's using the spacers to hold that off.
Right here.
Yeah. And the unit is in a horizontal application. He built a square plenum that sat on top of the wood going that way and going over. But there's other things. He forgot to get his pan up there. You can see the unit's laid in a horizontal application. Of course, there's no access. We have to have access and other things. And, it's my house. I know how to get there. Well, understand that.
Well, let's go to our next slide, which will do a little bit better job of trying to explain what you were showing a while ago.
Okay. So a lot of the heating and air, especially in the residential market, all our commercial guys that are paying attention to this, y'all have always met the NFP standards. You had to. This little old thing that says NFP A90B, that's all you're going to see in your manufacturer's instructions. You're not going to see anything. It just says it shall conform to NFPA 90A and 90B. Well, it's telling you that it's metal. It's telling you it's non-combustible. 90A is telling you what the plenum interior can be, the insulation or the breathing zone. 90B tells you the construction of what the plenum must be made out of. So that's an excellent illustration you built there that talks about the codes of 90B of the return or supply. It has to be of metal, measured along the heat exchanger. And I had a gentleman tell me, well, 90B doesn't pertain to air handler. Wrong. 90B pertains to any heating device, period, a heating appliance. It doesn't matter whether it does use the word heat exchanger, but further in the language, it tells you if it's electric air handler, if it's a heat pump, it does. The metal plenum that attaches these appliances, it's metal. And it's going to be based off NFPA 90B, and it's table 5001 or quadruple, whatever that is.
Well, when you think about how much heat can be generated by auxiliary heat, there's no question that it's got to be included as well. Even though they talk about furnace, they mean it to be both. Well,
look at that picture you have right there. We'll use it because I do see we go out on a lot of the fire situations, motor burns. Back in the day, for the older gray hair ones of us that had the conrails that went around the squirrel cage that would break off, they would go out. They would go and land on duct board and melt a hole in the duct board and go down.
Yeah.
And that can continue to the metal stops all that. That's what we're doing. The incandescent's dropping through on the supplier return. There's a reason for this madness. It's just a protection. It's a fire stopping.
Well, we'll look at each one of those very quickly since you pretty well covered them there. And that is this 5.1.3 talks about the furnace plenums. And it says that the furnace plenum shall be located a minimum of 36 inches from the heat exchanger, which will go back and look at that again. In other words, if this happens to be the auxiliary or this happens to be the heat exchanger, it's got to be 36 inches along this line here.
Yep. Or laying horizontally, or in an air handler situation, you might have the strips, which is going to be at the very top. Some of the Cat 3 furnaces, your condenser, and then you have your burner somewhere at the top. So it's so a rule of thumb we are looking for is a minimum of 3-foot plenum. Is what we're trying to instill into them, laying horizontally or vertical. Now, a question was posed to me: what do I do, Mr. Woodard, on a retrofit? I go in there, a 2-story application. I've got an 18-inch plenum. It's ducted. Sir, ma'am, whoever, just do your best. Just if it's duct board, remove it and put if you can only get 20 inches of metal, then get 20 inches of metal. But do not adhere duct board to these appliances. That's what we're trying to point out here.
Here we are. We was talking down there. We had a little picture of the return air opening. And of course, this tells you that you're going to have to reference manual D. It's the crazy thing about code is that it will tell you in one sentence, reference another particular code. And then all of a sudden, you've got another $150 to spend and pages worth of information that you got to know about.
We talked about, I know we're going a long time. I'm sorry, I'm going over.
It's all right. No, we're doing fine.
I'm trying to go. But there is a free, it's called the Air Diffusion Council. We talked about that in one of the Learns and Learns. It's the green manual, the 4th edition. Yeah. It's free to download. It is an outstanding reference. When you get to the 3rd page, it basically lists 1 through 20, and I've showed those to contractors. This is what you are supposed to actually have access to when you're doing a duct system. And it came from the flex duct industry to show all of those standards, the ULs, the ACAs, the NFPAs that we have. It's a lot. It is a lot that we have to get to. There was a chat question. I think we're going to get to it with 603. He wanted to know, can you do flex from the attic? If you're talking about going from the attic, dropping down into, no, that's metal. That is a 6037. I think we're going to get to that. Here we're talking about the face velocity of the grills. Now, guys and gals, I'm going to tell you, and we're going to own this. We've been failing at this, but we've been if you can see the ceiling above me is a drop-in ceiling, and we have for years, and we continue to do so. We've allowed the 200 square inches per ton. And I'm going to tell you that's been a bare minimum with our staff. And we tried to train. And that's still, if you can look at this chart that Tom put up here, what ACA Manual D is requiring. So if we get technically and go 280 square inches per ton, we'd look at it 560. A 20 by 20 is 400. And we've been allowing that for a 2-ton return. And I have the ones that we'll go in and there'll be a 16 by 24 and they'll go, well, that was my 3-ton unit. It matched up the base of my unit. No, that's not how we size filter returns for the static drop, where we have stat face velocity versus filter grill and so forth. So you distributors that are listening, help us out here. let's stock a minimum of a 200-inch filter return, so that when we're setting them out there, because we see this quite a bit, undersized filter grills on 2 tons, 1.5 tons, 3 tons, and you look at that chart and it's pretty clear. It's showing you that the minimum you're looking for.
That's
for
right.
Your base was.
So based on this, the minimum on a 2-ton with a filter grill would be about 568 or so square inches, which is a lot more. But, the way I've always thought about it, Tony, is that 500 is way too fast. 300 may be difficult The
Yeah.
homeowner and the builder not liking it. So if we could kind of come in there at about 400 feet per minute, that's not ideal, but sometimes you got to live with what you can get. And I know that's probably not what I ought to be saying, but that's kind of life that we live.
Well, we've seen with the ECM motors and the new variable speed, we've seen that until we go into a ramp up situation.
Mhm.
We've seen that where if we're ducted properly. Now, like when I said too, but if we're ducted properly, don't restrict that duct that just because, oh, I've stuck my large filter grill up there and I got a 20 by 25, but you
Yeah.
still had a 10-inch duct feeding it. So it's all a component. This is the start of where our return. So it all works together.
This is what you were talking about.
For the chat, I didn't read it, but this was it. So if anything that's penetrating a wall, floor, ceiling, if it's going through, it's metal. It's not flex duct. Once you get up into your boot is a rated metal boot, and then you can have like a flex duct boot. And once you're above your assembly, then you can run your flex. You could Plenum will go through the assembly. You can use your takeoff, then your flex will go. Your flex cannot, it doesn't matter. When I say flex, it flex connector, flex duct cannot penetrate. It's metal. And we've done this for years, and it's just they didn't realize they, like I'll give you a garage situation where at the end of the carport, they go up. They were always putting the metal. And as long as you're up above that, you can do it. But that 603, it talks about that in your mechanical code. I'm going to try to quickly see what these other.
This is a weird thing right here, in that you've got your NFPA 90A and 90B, and in the 90B, it implies back states that you could use gypsum board type X as the liner of the chase there, but down in IMC 6035.1, it says only on returns.
That is correct. So that's what's called a conflict. We have a section in our we have a section in our code book that is specific to this, where there's a conflict arise, the more stringent we'll go in. Most of the time during the conflicts, it's the installation instructions are more stringent than our minimum code. But it's return only. It is return only. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to use sheetrock for supply. And these, you got to remember, these are NFPA standards. These are nationwide pamphlet. And your NEC, for those electricians that are out there listening, is NFPA 70. And if you want to talk about a contradictory code, on one page it'll tell you one thing. You go to the right side of the page, it tells you totally different. This kind of happens sometimes in our NFPA standards.
I looked up the price on Type X 4x8 sheet of sheetrock, and it was like almost $18. And I thought, well, why would anybody do that when they could get a duct board that meets the criteria and is a whole lot easier to handle?
Yeah, it is a lot easier to handle. And yeah.
Plus, there's no question, did it meet the Type 8 X requirement? Whereas, if there's no label on it, how's anybody going to know?
Right. And we're just, if it's not allowed, mildew, that Asperilla penicillin will grow on even Type X. So it's not, it's not approved for supply. It is not.
There you go.
Okay, there you go. That's where we're saying it's going to be a non-combustible duct, and the points in that 5090B there will be dangerous. Those little particles that can break off and burn through it. That's why you can utilize that duct board in that chase going up. You cannot use that first 3-foot point we're talking about, where they're talking, they think it'll break, it'll fall or blow, whether it's on the positive side or gravity fed side. They want that protected, that 3-foot. That's why that chase way we saw could have been duct board, but the duct board can't adhere to the appliance on the return side or supply side. Negative pressure circulating fan. Okay, I want to give an illustration of this. So the return system circulating fan shall be arranged so the negative pressure from circulating fan can affect the air supply. So I'll give you an example of some old retrofit restaurants. And those of us know it. We sit down and we look up. It could be one of our favorite restaurants. You don't go look around and you don't tell it, but they make the best hamburger you ever had. But you look overhead and you see a furnace, a wide open furnace, and you saw this little filter rack base and a filter set on it. and that air is drawing all over that appliance and going right in that. That's what we're talking about here. So, in the other end of that, D, they're talking a minimum of 8 foot. I'm asking and begging and pleading 10 foot. Get out, get that return ducted away from that appliance. So then it was brought up about the Cat 3 sealed furnace. Same situation. It's the gas valve. They don't want that flue vent, even though it's PVC, they don't want that air being drug across the front of that appliance. They do not. That's what we're getting at here.
Let's see. Here's a little drawing that we made up that kind of summarizes the things that we've been talking about. That comes from Manual D. A lot of times people will say, how close should your first takeoff be from your extended plenum or reducing plenum? Manual D says you need to run about 5 feet before you start your takeoffs, and you need to have your extended plenum or your reducing plenum to end 18 inches after the last takeoff.
Okay. So, and I like the one section we're showing. So what they're referring to here is a branch run. So this is a branch run. So everyone paying attention. This is going from that takeoff to its termination out that register. This is not saying you can't take a trunk line and go feed 4 branches from this location. We're going and independently taking off and terminating into that. These are branch runs. So yes, this is correct. You cannot do branch runs from these. You do your takeoff or your trunk lines and then feed or get your branch in different locations. Yes, that's what we're referring to. And that's what they're meaning by this.
One of the things, Tony, we've just finished 1 year of continuing education being required. And I'm really impressed with our industry in that, we've got over almost 8,000 licensees in the state, and yet it is brand new. A lot of people didn't know anything about it. And yet it seems to me, at least from my perspective, you can talk about from yours, seems to me like our industry's tracking pretty good with this.
Our industry is, and I will use the trip that I took to Alaska, Tennessee, and I will also use that we have been approached by Tennessee and Oklahoma. They actually watch these YouTubes you say. And we have made strides in our industry. And I'm just traveling around can see a huge difference. I know that our old Tony's on here beating us up again about duct, but it's leading to our industry being a leader instead of being, there's Arkansas in last place of everything. For once, we need to go and be the leader, and we're heading that direction. So, yes, it has made a difference. The CEUs have made a difference. And if you reach out to a lot of the distributors, they will tell you the CEUs have made a difference. Not perspective. I mean, and a lot of them are doing what we set this up to do, Tom. They are providing this customer service for their customers. And it's a two-way street here, and it's working. It really is working.
Well, when you look at this, and I'm going to use the number 8,000 because it makes my calculations easy. That's 32,000 hours of training that have taken place in the state of Arkansas that a lot of folks would not have gotten any of it. A lot of them would have, but that's a phenomenal amount of training. And you can't have that much training and it not be better. The consumer is so much better for those 32,000 hours of training.
They are. And I'm proud to be a part of it.
I guess I really needed to note here is that I get questions a lot about, my license renews in January. Do I have to get my 4 hours in the month of January since it's 2024? And of course, the rule, as I understand it, has always been in the previous 365 days, which creates a bit of a headache for your office. But every 365 days, you've got to get 4 hours of continuing education. And you can't roll them over. You can't take an 8-hour class 1 year and use 4 of those and think you're going to use 4 of the next year. It's got to be brand new. But it's not hard. It's just, people think, well, I wonder how this works. Well, that's how it works.
Right. And when Representative Lindsay, when they passed the law, there's that 90-day window in there, and it's especially geared for the January, February contractor. You've got that time frame. If your class is not coming up till March and your license expired the 31st, renew your license with us and then email us the certificate. I do understand the computers create some deal, but you email them to me or Michael, and we'll get them uploaded to the contractor's files, and we'll move forward. So that time is there to allow the contractor. I don't want them stressing over that. They'll have time, especially these first 3-month contractors. They'll have that time to get that training and get it to us. Like say a March guy, and you're going to hold a training in April. If they attended that, that's 30 days after they renewed. That's plenty of time to get your certificate and get it to us.
Well, we had just a little bit of problems at the tail end of today's programs. But as always, if you have any questions, compliments, or complaints, you can always call the Department of Labor and Licensing HVACR program at 501-682-9201, 501-682-9201. And we look forward to being able to talk to you again in February.